go ahead and start. There we go. Our presentation tonight is History of Butterfly Studies in North America, with a brief review of the history of butterfly study in Europe and the evolution of butterfly books and field guides. The history of the amateur naturalist will be briefly addressed with an emphasis on how the tradition migrated to the New World. The evolution of the lay scientist, as exemplified by butterfly study, will be documented with commentary on the personalities of those who contributed. The various butterfly books and the eventual production of field guides will be discussed. Our speaker tonight, many of you know, is Jonathan Pelham. John has been a butterfly enthusiast from a young age, but supported his habit in adulthood by driving truck as a teamster. Since retiring, John has dedicated himself to multiple projects, including a butterfly atlas of the Western US. He is the science advisor for our organization, WBA, and he is also the curator of the butterfly collection at the University of Washington Burke Museum. Thank you so much, John, for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you. And you didn't go too overboard, you know, like I feel like I can live with that description. Are you guys seeing my screen here?
Not yet.
Oh dear. So I got to do the share screen thing.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Oh man, how come? Well, that's because they put it at the bottom. All right. You seeing it now?
It says you've started, but we don't see the screen yet. There we go. We see it now. And it looks good. It's the full, oops, now you're not sharing anymore. Are you using the share screen button, John?
Well, I tried.
Well, it worked just a moment ago. Okay, so leave it, don't touch it. It looks good.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I've struggled with this, and there's a lot of reasons. Some of it was 300 slides worth of presentation. I've got it down to 160, and that's way too many. So I'm going to be lickety split. You know, I got some breaks built into this thing, and so we get there. And we can actually, break to ask questions if you have some. I also changed the title because I was much too generous with myself before. So basically, this is a brief history of butterfly books and field guides for the United States and Canada, and then the evolution of the butterfly naturalist citizen scientist in America. I would have liked to do more, but it's just too much. First of all, we have to start with what natural history is. And actually, natural history is something we're born with, and it's prehistorical. Okay, the modern translation, I think, is let's see what's under that rock. And when it's considered science, it's called natural science. But in actual fact, it's driven by some of the same things that drive science, especially, the curiosity aspect. It's time and elements are really all else that, constrain it. And it's definitely experiential. Okay, so that's why it's an inherent part of our experience as young folks growing up. Science is from the Latin word scientia, meaning knowledge, and it's the accrual of knowledge. It's curiosity driven, just like natural history. And it's constrained by observation, measurement, and data. Therefore, it's experimental. Now, these aren't like super important in the context of where we're going to go tonight, but it's useful to keep in mind that we are naturally naturalists. And if anyone, doubts that, you just watch little kids and their tendency to turn rocks over, to look at things and to wonder at things. Okay. Now that tendency can be eroded from us. Maybe it's urbanization, maybe it's something else. It doesn't matter. But science, on the other hand, has to be learned. The scientific method has to be taught. So we as naturalists have been doing this business for thousands of years, and we as scientists are learning to love. And so that enters the citizen scientist. Now, one way you can counter, young people being disenchanted with nature is to take them with you. these are my kids, and there's that other fellow, the big hairy chested fellow. Who is that? It's Tarzan. No, it's Pyle. And behind him is Merrill Peterson. And this is a group that we went up to, near Lake Cushman in 1983. And I took my kids. You know why? Because why not? They had a natural interest, and they executed it, and they enjoyed themselves. That's the way to do that business. And I noticed that we have that working for us. The science and natural history are still learning how to hold hands, but butterflies in particular are represented in ancient and or religious indigenous lore. A painting from the tomb of Nebamun in Egypt. This is amazing. I found this. I had a paper written for the Lepsock Journal that had a number, and I'll show you a plate from that, had a number of images that were pretty interesting. But this is absolutely amazing. It shows a cat chasing birds, and then there's all these butterflies flying around. Well, holy crap, that's a monarch type. I mean, that's one of the Danaids. It's actually maybe not recognizable to species, but you can definitely see that it's a monarchoid thing. So, that plate from the journal that I was talking about shows many more. You can't see most of them, but this is 3,000 years old. So, even early in prehistory, in post, historical development, there are representations of butterflies. And so, like, that's not just true of butterflies, it's true of grasshoppers, but we're not talking about grasshoppers tonight. All right. So Mesoamerican images are also interesting to me, and I found a number that were interesting. I think to everyone. The last slide that I'll show you is an interpretation of Itzapapalotl. And I didn't even get close. Obsidian butterfly. Actually, she is a focal point of a cult in Mexico as we speak. When you see her, you'll understand why I say the goddess of holy crap. But the Aztecan motif, I mean, you can almost recognize this. It's something like a three-tailed swallowtail, which occurs in Mexico City. This was recovered from a temple, and this next one, I'm not so sure. It was a tapestry, I understand, but the butterfly motif is obvious there. All right. And this one here is interpreted, but it gives you the impression. And again, it's a butterfly that we sort of recognize, right? I mean, these are thousands of years old and by people who had no systematic understanding. There's my girl, like Itzapapalotl. Yeah. But the fact that she is the obsidian butterfly recommends that butterflies were an active part of primitive cultures, long before, we decided to recognize them. See, so for much of history, the average citizen, which would have been a farmhand, would have been, somebody tending cattle or sheep, they viewed natural history obliquely. It was not the centerpiece of their daily endeavor, but it was a part of it because, you were going to see, things associated with your endeavors in the field or your endeavors in tending your livestock. So it was an oblique phenomenon. All right. And for much of the same history, the pursuit of esoteric knowledge, including natural history, was engaged in by people of higher order, either standing higher in society or they were wealthy enough that they didn't have to pay attention. They could do what they will. This all changed in the 16th and 17th centuries, and there's a couple of reasons. But I think the two most pertinent, at least to me, I went and sorted through a bunch of them, and I decided that it wasn't just the invention of the moving type for printing. It was actually the Gutenberg Bible, because the Bible being, a part of the mainstream cultural and political and religious thrust in society in Europe at that time, became, really important, in the hands of the average citizen. Well, that implied that the average citizen had to become literate, either implied it or, it drove it eventually. So this is a pretty important thing. And then next was, the fact that became a historical reference. So information piled on information became, a sort of a reservoir that people could dip into, and the more literate people became, the more they could dip into it. The second, part of this is like very important feature of books is that reservoir of knowledge. But it's really interesting to see how this manifested in American butterfly books. So I will jump to that after I get through this basic, preliminary discourse. And the second event is really important to understanding the evolution of natural history into a common phenomenon for the everyday person was Carl Linnaeus. What he did was he attempted to rectify Adam's failure, as indicated in Genesis. Adam was to name everything. Well, he didn't, and neither did Carl Linnaeus. But the idea was, he tried, and we are really, really, indebted to the ability that he, well, the inclination he gave to us, because we like to put things in order. He attempted it, and the fact that in this huge universe we live in, there's always going to be work to do, doesn't mean that we can't make constant inroads on the ability to put things in order. The age of exploration, which was simultaneous with all this, is very important in that most of the people engaging in these expeditions were common folk. They were people that either manned the ships or became colonists in new worlds. And upon arriving in these new worlds, of course, they're interested in the natural resources, A, for export, and B, for sustenance. It turned out that natural curiosities had commercial traction back home. And if you think natural curiosity could be anything from an elephant to butterflies, and of course butterflies are easier to ship. All right, so the accrual of these cabinets of curiosities was actually wonderfully detailed by Kim earlier this year. And it was like that was an important part of the evolution of natural history books, because these curiosities found their way into these books, and then the literate people, the people who were becoming literate, got a hold of them, and that actually enticed them to be interested in living creatures around them. It's de facto. I can't prove that, but it seems like that's what happened, right? So I gave a presentation earlier, and I started with that presentation, trashed it about a week ago. All the pre-Linnaean, natural history books, there were a lot of pictures, and they were really cool, but hey, I can't do it. But there's one that I have to do, and that's this one. It is astounding. Even now, looking back, I first encountered the phenomenon in 1963 or 62. But this butterfly was painted by a colonist, and it was published in a book in the 17th century, and it's actually recognizable. And it was by this fellow named Thomas Moffat. I've noticed that had his name variously spelled. I don't know if that's a product of Old English translating into Mid English, translating into that current English, but he is responsible for that poem, Little Miss Muffet. Sitting on her tuffet, or I guess it would be Little Miss Moffat sitting on her toffet. But that's, this is the state of knowledge in 1634. This is the frontispiece, and this is the page that has, I don't know, I can't seem to get my thingy to do its thing. This is the page that has that picture. Anybody recognize that butterfly on the left? It looks like our tiger swallowtail, but of course it's the eastern tiger swallowtail. And the story of how it came to be was, a fellow named John White was put in charge of one of Sir Walter Raleigh's expeditions to the New World. And this was, in fact, the lost Roanoke colony in what was called Virginia, but it actually is Carolina. And he rendered this painting and brought it home, and it ended up being in Moffat's collection for display. Now, William Jacob Holland, one of the people that I'll be talking about that wrote a butterfly book, actually had this figure, and that's how I came to know it in 1962. And let's see, and this is it. You can barely see the scrawls because I copied it from the book, but the scrawls actually give the detail that that the butterfly, they call it manankawa. It could be an indigenous word for butterfly, but it could just as easily be that butterfly, that the people there knew what that butterfly was, and that's what they told John White. But you can see that it's kind of like no butterfly really looks like that with the curly cute, forewings and the tails and everything. But this was in 1710 when, when it was actually, well, it was 1634, right. So like that's a long time ago to be having a. So it's not a butterfly book, but it gives you an idea. The first butterfly book for the United States was written by two Brits, one who lived in Georgia, and it's the natural history of the rarer Lepidopterous insects. It's like this amazing book, exceedingly rare, definitely not a field book. In fact, we have to be thankful for to Biodiversity Heritage Library that we even have wide access to it. This is a pretty amazing thing in that John Abbott himself was responsible for many images of butterflies that later got named, even though his name is not appended to any of them. But these are the two fellas, a Smith on the right, Abbott on the left. It doesn't look like Abbott, is a really, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Sunken chin. It's not a great photograph, and I don't think he posed for it. But at any rate, this is the frontispiece. It's not a big deal, but man, those plates. It's astounding, showing the life history as best he could, and it was accurate. This is much later, so than Marion, so that he probably learned something from Marion. But page after page of butterflies that are familiar to us, easily recognizable and distinguishable with their life history. Sometimes accurate life history, but sometimes not on the right food plan. And this was a real breakthrough. But nobody in America had. I don't think a single copy existed in America for 100 years. Okay, somebody had to buy one and bring it back. So like that was the level of knowledge. People in the New World, they were carving out an existence and cutting down trees and stuff like that, digging holes in the ground, mining coal. I could go on. But these are outstanding, and this is an American butterfly book, and I'm proud of it, and it's like an amazing thing. Not too much later, about 40 years actually, 1837, a guy named Bois de Vol. You guys know about Bois de Vol because we have Bois de Vol's blue, and his name's appended to a lot of butterflies. He was a French entomologist, lepidopterist. And then John LeConte, of course, I don't know, maybe not, of course, you don't know, but he was a prominent entomologist at this time. And really at a time when there really wasn't much in the way of a developed natural history science in the New World. They collaborated, and that's Bois de Vol on the left, LeConte. That's the best image I could get, but I got one anyway. They collaborated to do a book essentially on the butterflies of North America, which is like probably stretching it a good deal. But again, Abbott's paintings were in this book, and they, they were good and were good. But again, this is something. Oh no, something terrible has happened.
Can you back up, John, and see if you can see an earlier slide?
Not so far.
Okay.
That's really disturbing. Oh, wait a minute.
There we go.
All right. Well, I don't know what happened. All right. So that's the deal. I got to the first break. If we don't need a break here, that's fine. I'll just give it, the opportunity. Is there any reason to?
No, keep on going.
All right. So far we got these two North American butterfly books, both of which they're basically European, both of which weren't in America available to anybody. So they really weren't American butterfly books except in the area that they covered. Okay, now we need to keep in mind that, the mid-19th century in the New World, essentially scientifically underdeveloped. And that was because, there's so much expansion, so much people moving around, even universities, like the major universities were all in the Northeast. And it was just not a large, a well-developed scientific community. However, as the civil conflict began to develop, so did, in fact, the scientific communities. And this one in particular is going to be just so cool. I'm so excited about this. All right. The homegrown endeavor that I'm going to talk about involves us in Washington. Okay. So there is a fellow named Alexander Agassiz. Now, you guys probably heard of Louis Agassiz. He's a famous, natural historian and geologist, came, from France with his son, his whole family, and established a tradition. It really, was a tradition, an American tradition that bears his name. His son actually did as well in terms of physical accomplishments. He didn't quite get the reputation, but he did with me, because he accompanied the ship Fauntleroy north from San Francisco, along the Pacific coast, basically, doing, measuring work, geodetic stuff. But they spent the summer in Port Townsend. And while there, he collected butterflies. And 3 of those butterflies were later in 1861 described from Port Townsend. As far as I know, they're the earliest butterflies ever, collected in the Pacific Northwest. Now, my Canadian friends may inform me otherwise. I don't know for sure. All those that I asked said they didn't think so, but this is 1859. So I had a chance when I was at the MCZ to look at these berry specimens, and these are they. There's actually more. These are, basically the types. This is marginalis, and this is Menapia, our local subspecies, and this is Coleus occidentalis. These are the names upon which, these are the butterflies upon which those names are given. And that happened in 1859, and it happened in Port Townsend, Washington. So this is pre-Civil War, and it's not an inconsiderable achievement. In 1861, Scudder named them. That's also pre-Civil War. Most of everything that happened in butterflying, after that was post-Civil War. Civil War was, as you might imagine, a little bit upsetting. So, and you will hear, Edward's name. He's appended, to a lot of butterfly names, and his major contribution, as far as the book is concerned, is The Butterflies of North America. I hate to tell you how many books have that title, and very few of them actually cover the area stated. He did, by and large. It was a 3-volume set, so it wasn't a field guide. I'd say definitely not a field guide. Those are, octavo, or I don't know, big. Those are big volumes, right? And this is he, and he was an interesting cat. I like everything that he did, except he owned and operated a West Virginia coal mine. And well, dude, I'm a labor guy, so it's some bad times in West Virginia, if you know what I'm saying. But the fourth thing is he looks like John Shepherd. Okay. Now, tell me, am I wrong? No, I think not. At least not far wrong. So, I'm good with that. This is a title page for one of the volumes, and I'm just going to go through here because I got a lot of slides to show you. I want to make sure, I get through them, so you can get a feel for the kinds of books that existed, and the kinds of books that were out of the reach of most customers. Although I will say something at the end of this. When Butterflies of North America came out, all of a sudden entomology became more popular, and butterflies in particular. So it wasn't like, he was writing these books in a vacuum. It took him 3 volumes because he had to get subscribers. And as a result, he had to, have somebody to sell them to. There, obviously he did. And these are in most major libraries throughout the United States. So these are American butterfly books, and these are books that, amateurs did have a chance to get to, and there was a growing amateur population. They were not field guides. Now, I'm sorry, I have a soft spot for this guy, Scudder. There's, butterflies that, are called Scudderi, and they're butterflies with Scudder's name, like Pyrus marginalis and margin white. This guy was amazing. And this, even though it's Eastern United States and New England, it's an amazing set. Again, you can see, not a field guide. In fact, only Stewart would be able to carry that into the field. This is him as a youth, and he looks like Rick Littlefield, but I digress. The point behind this, he's older, he still looks like Rick Littlefield. The point behind it is this is my favorite set of butterfly books from that era. Nobody did it better, and it wasn't just in terms of butterflies. He was a well-known orthopterist, and his work in fossil insects remains top notch. His all the butterflies from Florissant that he described are being considered as we speak. So this is an example. I'm going through quickly, okay, of the kind. I mean, he had range maps, all right, range maps in the late 1800s. It was like he basically gave us an idea how maybe we could do things, all right, and that is an important part. If you know field guides, current field guides often have range maps, and you'll notice they don't look that much different from these, all right. So like he set the stage. And then there's William Jacob Holland. Now the butterfly book, all right, I like it because it does get the butterflies of North America in there, but it's the butterfly book. And most of the people that I talk to that you don't have to explain things to, you say the butterfly book, Holland's butterfly book, everybody knows what you're talking about. It's either this one or the later edition, and there's really no doubt about it. But to me, the key element here is popular. Butterflies were becoming popular. Now, popular, can be, like pop culture, you can have a negative connotation, but popular actually means there's a lot of people. And, that means that there's a high end and a low end. And it's the low end that we're looking at, because the low end is not non-academic, they're common folk, but they're the people, there's more of them, and there's more people spread out over a larger area. And actually they have a very important role to play. And it turns out, in fact, that this was a really important part of butterfly development of butterfly knowledge in this country, because when they became popular enough, that the intermediate people, the people that, were collectors, they built collections, they maybe wrote articles or even described species, they proliferated and they became the mainstay of butterfly science. William Jacob Holland, he named a few species, but not many. Scudder did too, but not many. Many more were named by people who were actually amateurs, actually collectors. Now, this is my idea of Holland. He was really kind of a stuffed shirt. I like him. I mean, despite that, he was responsible. He worked at, at the Carnegie Museum, and he was responsible for getting the skeleton of Diplodocus distributed all over the world. One sits in St. Petersburg as we speak. Okay, so like I went through this, and that's but this is an example. These are lithographed. They're kind of a poor lithograph. I look back now and I see, well, like it could have done better, but this is a common book. You can get it pretty cheaply. So if you feel you need to have it, I would say, yeah, pick it up. This one I include mostly because, if it's, it affects us on the West Coast. William Greenwood Wright, who's a character. I won't say anymore. And it's not a field guide either, but he had really nice lithographed plates, actually. And he addressed it, our fauna. He actually named our orange tip, our Julia orange tip, our subspecies in Western Washington. So, these title pages really don't show it very well, and I'm sorry about that, but the plates were actually good. They were, funny specimens were prepared poorly maybe, but they really were true to life, and they were actually identifiable, and they were jam-packed onto a plate many times too. But they were, I loved it. This is my fourth butterfly book, and I treasured it. I got from Shorey's bookstore. So that's, like obviously the enthusiasm that people had for butterflies extended all the way to the West Coast. Now here, I only include this because I felt I had to. This guy in Germany decided he was going to do, the butterflies of the world. Well, that was an endeavor that noble, but it's like it wasn't a miserable failure, but it was. It was overwhelming. I think most people looking at it today are still overwhelmed, but it's huge. and it had lots of pictures, and they were paintings. They weren't lithographs, but they were well done and, largely useful. They covered too large an area. Like if you were looking for butterflies that, were in the Northwest, you might go through plate after plate after plate before you get the one that remotely resembled it. So it's definitely not an identification guide. It's more like a textbook. All right. You need a break now?
I got a comment from Carolyn. She said she was just recently given a book by Clarence Weed called Butterflies Worth Knowing from 1917.
Yep. Well, they were worth knowing, but that was a book targeting, the more of a mainstream, and it didn't have a lot of butterfly species. And I really kind of slop over most of those. I am looking at like mainstream butterfly books of note. There's an awful lot of things that I actually, didn't include, but I already have 160 slides. So it's gonna,
Right.
anything more?
Well, I have a question about the collections that Agassiz did in Washington State. You just showed one specimen. Were there multiples, and are they voucher species?
There were, there were 3 other species involved, a total of 35 specimens that I have documented. And I looked at all of them, but those 3 were actually given names. They were new to science.
Okay, great. So go ahead.
All right. So now we move into a new age. And the reason why I picked this is because we already talked about the butterfly book, but also it was my second butterfly book. I got it Christmas in 1962, and it is a wonderful document, and it really reflects the growing interest in butterflies. But it came at an inauspicious moment in history, as you might know. The economies of the world were, failing, and World War was, impending. So, I'll just go through it and say that, like it's a really important, turning point in a way, because what happens next gets right down the alley of where we want to be. And that is, the evolution of field guides. Okay. So, I said that the butterfly interest is mostly collector driven. They didn't have anything else. I mean, cameras were rudimentary at best. And the ability to take photographs in the field was, entirely compensated for by the fact that people could collect and make collections. All right. Now, I would say that the biggest transition between then and now is not only the equipment that we have, but the skill of the people using it. And that's a definite product of field guides, as we'll detail. Okay, so these were textbooks. I mean, there's no question that taking them into the field is improbable. And like you really couldn't, have done it. Then I asked the question, well, is it possible that, making a small field guide, with the same kind of information, was too hard to do? I don't know that for sure. I think the fact that it took, until 1951 to actually pull it off suggests that it might. So Alexander Barrett Klotz, this is my third butterfly book. And it's butterflies of Eastern North America. It doesn't matter, because this is a wonderful tome. If you can pick it up, you'll never regret it. It was in the Peterson Field Guide series. It was the first one outside of the birds. And it's worthy of all of them. And it's rich with information. The photographs are iffy. The renderings are better, you'll see. They used field marks for the first time. They borrowed it from the birders, and it really did seem to work well for the people using it. Of course, they live in Eastern United States, not Western United States, like a whole different story, but that is another story. So I don't know what the history of European field guides really was like, because I went through and looked, and most of the things that I looked at were tomes of book size, not really, hand guide size. By the time that Klotz's work came out, it caught on pretty quick. It didn't take long. By the 60s, European hand guides were becoming more and more common. And of course, they prevail there now. It was I said the fourth. I was the third butterfly book I had, and after Ehrlich, which is going to come in Holland. I treasure this book, and you definitely should get it because it's just full of information. Typical Peterson Field Guide cover, don't you think? The renderings are, they're okay. They're diagnostic, but you can see the field marks, and it's really a useful way to approach the subject that other people have exploited, and I think effectively, more or less effectively, depending on where you live. And then there was my book. This is a book that no one apparently but me likes. I keep giving it to people, pages I send to them, and it's like, oh, that's nice. It's hard. It's technical, okay? And it's because it's by Paul Ehrlich. This guy is one of the leading evolutionary biologists on the planet. And he was, a systematist. I mean, basically he was, all everything. I was in awe of him. I got to go collecting with him, and I think the only reason that I was taller than him, I guess that put us on less unequal ground. But this book I got in December 7th or October 7th, 1962 is my first one, and I cite it still. I constantly refer to it. I refer people to it. It is a problem, because it doesn't have color pictures, right? But it is field ready. It fits in your pocket. It's a little bit bigger than Klotz's book. That's not that much bigger than the other field guides that have come out subsequently. The lack of color pictures make it hard, for the person who is interested in butterflies, to glom onto it, because now we're looking back and we have all these field guides. It looks, kind of creepy. But it does have wonderful keys. And, once one becomes familiar with, both butterfly morphological terminology and how to use keys, it's a wonderful book to have. Would I recommend it to a photographer right off the bat? Nah, probably not. Could he use it? It. Eventually, get to the point where he's going to find it useful. Cover. Lots and lots of figures like this, like you want to know what areas of the wing are, there it is. And you want to know what genitalia pieces are, there they are. Just points of reference. If you don't, want to know, then you turn the page and you get to something else, right? The species accounts, again, these are the images. They're not horrible. You can do it, and the keys, once you learn how to use them, they work, they're all right. But they are a limitation, and I understand, where people are coming from. But the entries are information rich. They have, life history, they have distribution. Sometimes they even have some taxonomic, discussion. It's like, it's a worthwhile book to get, and they're cheap. So they're online too, if you wanted to print one out for that matter. But this is the book that most people think of, when they think of recent butterfly books. Again, it's in the tradition of the old butterfly books. It's too big to stick in your pocket. It's not a field guide, but it's a heck of a book, and it's edited by William Howe. He completed some of the sections in the book, so he's not just an editor, but he did employ a lot of experts, including our own John Shepard for Parnassians, and the lesser fritillaries. And so it is an incredible reference work. And the images, the paintings by William Howe, they're not terrible. I mean, I'm not going to say they're the best. And, it's always better to have a natural photograph or even a specimen photograph than a rendering, because you just don't know. What's going to come out of that. And so I got clever here. If you can get it, you won't regret it. Get it, don't regret. Okay, I'm done. That's the cover. And these are examples of the plates within it. And you can see these are not useless. Because they're paintings, he could, put one side of upper side on one side and the underside on the other. It was actually pretty darn useful. And a lot of people used it. It was in 1975, so it wasn't even that long ago. But this, if you take Klotz in 1951 and then you add it to this, both versions, this was the book that actually set the standard, and for all intents and purposes, is the model around which everything else evolved. Okay, so this is self-explanatory. You guys know what Bob looks like. This is an example. Now, here's another example. And this is him in the movies, or somebody, playing Bob in the movies. This is how I look at him. This is my baby. Honestly, he don't like this much. I hope he's still in England, but I mean, dude, does he not look like Bob Pyle? I mean, you tell me. So, I love the heck out of him. So this is, the book that really, really got things rolling. Definitely field guide size, all photographs and of nearly every butterfly that had ever been recorded at that time. That was no mean feat. It wasn't easy to do. And I know because I was there. So like you might dispute that, watching Washington butterflies, was at the root of the watcher photographer phenomenon. I personally think so, but I was there, so I'm biased. But there's no argument that this tone revolutionized butterfly field guides. So like the thing about it is being there and watching it happen and, like participating at some level or another. And then, seeing it, actually happen. And it was like, whoa, this is amazing. I got to be a part of this. And that has magnified over the years because you have seen it affect other people's lives. And this was Caitlin Barr's first butterfly book. Do I need to say any more than that? She's smiling. She got a nice smile, huh? So now this is, again, they said a natural history and field guide. Not so much. I mean, like it's a book and, it's not a field guide. I mean, unless you're Stuart Wexler. It's, however, it is amazing. And one of the great butterfly, minds of all time, not just our era. It is a contribution to knowledge and expertise, but it's hard to read. The images are, as you'll see, kind of meh, and the text is difficult prose, but it's so packed with information that you just don't almost have to have it. All right. And these are the plates. I mean, he jammed everything in, he pulled wings off of things to get them on the plates. And it's just, I don't know, it looks like a kaleidoscope of chaos, but it's still useful. I mean, I don't think that I value the figures and the plates as much as I value the text. But and it's like you can't really be serious and not have one around. So now we come to the hard part. And how much time do I have?
You're good. Keep going.
Well, I mean, I'm good.
So according to the clock, you have 12 minutes.
Oh dear.
But you can go a little over. It's fine.
All right. Well, I'm all right. All right. So I got to this point, and then I realized I got a problem because I have monitored these books. I keep them in the bibliography, but they are not handbooks to me. They are compilations of information I've already sussed. And I'll explain that later on more as an excuse than anything. But because they're fine books, they're not to be discarded on account of what I just said. And so like I can't claim I know them well. I will treat them and we'll go through them, and then you guys can give me some feedback yourself. Now, Paul Oppler has been, one of those other people that he's kind of, I mean, he's popular enough, people know him and all that, but, people don't know all the stuff that he does. He's the fundament of our community. He has enabled, people, and he helps people now, and he's helped people way back when. He's the product of Jerry Powell's, Berkeley, professor, his major professor. I mean, Jerry Powell has a bunch of them, and he's just one of them. So like, he's an incredible dude, and he figured out, Bob and he are buddies, and he figured out that this is a way to go, to get, field guys into the hands of people, and they were extraordinary. I cannot say anything bad about these guides. I just don't use them. I mean, first of all, I don't live in Eastern US, but he did a Western one too. So I have them. And, every once in a while, I actually do cite Paul Oppler in a few places where he uses a combination for the first time, and I have to, suss it for the catalog. But it's like, I am not one to evaluate whether or not they're useful. I'm not qualified because they well, they're not useful to me, especially. And, I'm not a good person, to mention it. Again, and they did a great service to the Peterson Field Guide, and they may have exceeded clots, but not by reputation so much as by content. And then Jeffrey, I mean, he is, he followed in suit, and he did things that were even more user friendly. I mean, I would say that if we had to, look at user friendly field guides, Jeffrey definitely he came through with user-friendly field guides. I'll never say anything bad about Jeffrey because the fact that he brought so many people into our community really, 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 really made a difference. Really did make a difference. So, and he kept up. We'll get to his later tomes. This is my favorite one of them. It's because I know both authors, but it's the Butterflies of North America. I mean, just the same Butterflies of North America. It's a focus field guide. He did some bird stuff, I guess. I don't know, but it's a good book. Jim Brock, very good butterfly guy. So he had field marks that actually worked for especially Western butterflies, which, by the way, Jeffrey did all right because he consulted with people and he did okay. I would not, I'd hate to have to identify, fritillaries, and or checker spots and or green hair streaks from well, honestly, from any of these books, really, it's going to be a challenge. But so I don't know how many of you have seen this, but it's actually a good book to pick up because it's pretty information rich. And then of course Jeffrey's the Mexico and Central American volume, which ended up being a little controversial, and of course the most recent one, which I think this is the best of the lot. Well, my personal feeling, I actually have looked at this, and I think it's the best that he's done so far. The problem with the Through the Binoculars series is that they were kind of an experimental thing, and by the time he got to the Swift field guides, he kind of worked out the kinks. The problem with the Mexican Swift guide was that he pissed off a bunch of Mexicans. Spanish speaking people don't want their English speaking friends to tell them what their butterflies are called, right? So that was an issue. So now we got to the point where I'm gonna I'm almost on schedule. I fear, and I feared unnecessarily, apparently, that I had taken too long to get to this point. That I had exceeded my bounds and it was going to get a sound spanking. But so there's 3 points that I like to make. And, we have traced the path of a butterfly study from a point where only those that had the ability, the means, were be able to study them. Through the emergence of the collector naturalist and eventually to the watcher and photographer naturalist, and to the point where it is now. And I consider this point in time maybe a summary moment in the sense that the diversity of people that we have in our community, just in the Northwest, but across the country, in terms of their interests, their capabilities, and their energies, is just really contributory to an overall growth and to growth of knowledge, but growth in terms of butterfly studies in general. Now, I know this is mirrored elsewhere. I know other studies, I hear birder people and mammal people saying, yeah, there's a thing going on here, and that's good. But I just look at it in terms of what it means for butterfly studies. So, being selfish, I don't really feel too bad about that. The accessibility of all these field guides has just, really increased the number of people that, want to know about butterflies, that, actually find themselves identifying butterflies. And, I can't see that this is a bad thing at all. And it's accessibility. I mean, I think the audience was out there. People obviously, targeted that audience. But it was like being able to, invest a certain amount of money in producing something that might have flopped. That's a little bit of a gamble. People like, well, I think Audubon, that was a little bit of a gamble. I think Bob, made it worthwhile for him, and of course that set the stage for Jeffrey. But there was a little bit of a gamble putting yourself out there, to put field guides out there that might not have been that popular. They ended up being. So, like, this is all really, really good thing. But more than anything, I have to, excuse myself, because I am the keeper of names. All right. I make no bones about that. I monitor scientific names, old names and new names, as they are used in any publication since 1758. So, like I said, some cases I actually do use information from field guides. In the catalog, I have cited Doppler. I try not to cite Glassberg because I more likely say something not nice, and it's not nice to say not nice things. So thus, I find myself not citing these very often, but I think that my lack of familiarity is actually, a fault. I didn't realize how faulty I was until I began to put this thing together. And I said, what am I going to say about these things? Like, I go to the shelf and I look at it and I said, look, you're going to do it halfway. And it's better not to do it halfway than just to admit that you're incompetent. All right. So, but now at the end of all of this, and I sat on this page for a while, making sure I tried to say this properly. More eyes looking, more time spent, more ground covered. We have been rewarded. I just got done talking about Tana and the elephant she found in the Puget Prairies. We just got done talking to Cheryl about the Mormon metal mark larva that she found, and it's well known what she's done with the Parnassus that she reared from her ranch. And everyone knows what Melanie has contributed in terms of overall cohesiveness, keeping me reined in, making me do things, and getting people out in the field. And I mean, like, this is a community of people that wouldn't exist really outside of the fact that we have this really diverse community together. So, as an example, and that's why the last 2 weeks really did change the emphasis that I was trying to make. We described a butterfly, Celestrina asherae. And I just got to admit, I say, us old hands, I'm going to take the blame. I'm the old hand. We didn't get this done on our own. Really seriously, up until 2020, we had it wrong. And how did that change? Well, it wasn't just one person, Melanie, it was, or Gary Bernard going out there. It wasn't just, Dan and Kathy. It wasn't just the authors. It was like this collective thing, this aggregation of people that pulled together. Now, I can't tell you how rewarding that is. You guys participated, and it's like, oh, wow, that's cool. But I've been doing this a long time, and I was really, really startled by how remarkable this is. I've been honking our community for some time, but we really did something. All right. So, and Bob and I, we always marvel at this, and we're interested in this, going to see what comes of it. And this is another very good thing. So I'm done, man. I made it in time. I can't believe I'm actually a minute early.
Yeah, you were talking kind of fast.
I was.
So we got a couple comments in the chat here. So I'd ask David Droppers to unmute if you're still on. He does have a comment in the chat where his favorite new line is a kaleidoscope of chaos. That is rather marvelous. But David, would you mind asking your question about unpublished material?
One moment, I have to see exactly how I worded it.
I'm looking at it. In the history of those that contributed to the knowledge of our fauna but never published. Yeah, but it's oblique. Like, I've collected notes from people. It's like horrible thing actually to know that there's some people that didn't get things done and they died and they won't ever get it done. This fellow Ken Phillip in Alaska, you know, the butterflies of Alaska, he'd been working on, I've been working on him for, you know, with him for 20 years. He was, you know, working on it. He's working on it, working. Then he died and there was nothing left. And, you know, somebody came in and they published, you know, a posthumous volume, but it wasn't what he was going to do. So my buddy Steve Kohler, you know, like he's actually published, so he's not exactly like one of the people you're talking about, but he has a Butterflies of Montana waiting. Yeah, there's people like Dan Carney. You know, he actually published a few papers here and there, but he had a vast reservoir of knowledge that I had to sleuth from him. And so, like, yeah, there are people out there. I try not to let them go. You know, somebody, I'll get them.
Well, the first one that came to mind, I know he didn't necessarily sample Washington, was Pierre Lorquin. And, you know, maybe he never actually intended to publish. He was more, it seemed like he was more of a field guy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So just kind of curious if you had known any history of basically those field guides, that those field people that contributed to the field but never actually got their name in papers.
Well, I will say this, you know, currently I have to work, you know, from the current realm. Currently, we have a lot of people that contribute material to people who publish and are recognized within those tomes. There's a lot of people that don't like the, you know, the idea that they're going to have to publish. And anyone who's ever, you know, published an article knows how difficult that is. And it means you have to do the review process. You have to do all of the things that, you know, come with, you know, the preparation of every facet of, and you have to go through it 3, 4, 5, 6 times. It's arduous, and there's a lot of people that just don't want to do that. But they will donate, you know, their time and effort and expertise to those that can or will. So nowadays it's better because we're connected. When you go back to Pierre Lorquin, I think probably he was mostly interested in making his fortune. And one of the ways that he could make some money was sending specimens back to Waterval. Because, I mean,
he was originally a gold digger, right?
Yeah, that's right. He ended up making no money digging gold, but he had a saloon that was pretty popular.
Okay, hey, John, can you unshare your screen so we can see
Oh, what, my face?
your visage? Yes, as you're talking.
No, I can't. I
There
will
we go.
not.
Okay. There's a really lovely story from Christy Dubois. Would you mind unmuting and sharing that?
Can everybody hear me?
I
Yeah.
do now. Yeah.
Good. I'm switched to a headset and I never know if the thing's working or not, but now I got to find my comment. But my comment was when I was a kid growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, they had a you know, Holland's butterfly book in the library, and I had that thing checked out constantly. and then it'd come due and I'd have to take it back, and then a couple weeks later I'd check it out again. I don't think anybody else ever got to see the book, and I always wanted one of my own. And finally, I think about 20 years ago, I decided to go ahead and buy one online, and I actually ended up with the latter edition that you talked about instead of the earlier edition that I had checked out of the library. But that had a big influence on me, that book. I just loved that book. And then I didn't put in the comments that later on, well, not later on, actually, when I was a kid, Dover republished the Moth book as a Dover book, a paperback Dover book. I don't think they ever did the Butterfly book, but they did the Moth book, and I bought the Moth book for $5, which is a lot of money for me when you're a kid. I still have that. I figured Carl would like that comment because, yeah. Anyway, that was kind of my comment. Some of these old books, you know, just had a big influence on some of us, if that's what we had available in the library.
Well, you're a witness to what I was talking about. You know, definitely.
That's right.
So Maureen, would you mind unmuting and just make your comment to everyone? I didn't know Heidi, and so I'm just kind of interested to hear your comments about Heidi.
Yeah, Heidi Alsh founded WBA, and she was just really great at building community. And that was really, I think, one of her main principles of of WABA, that she wanted it to be a welcoming and friendly community. And it to me, it just seems like the community that John was talking about all arose because of Heidi's efforts.
Well, there's no question. And, like Heidi, we stand as a monument to what she did. I mean, every time that someone comes and gives a presentation, or every time that there's a GNOME published with, novel information, every time, another person joins, it is an addition to what, she did. I don't even know. I know the last time I had a talk with her, she didn't really know where it was going to go. She worried that it was going to die out and, like kind of fritter away and everything. And I think she'd be really pleased to see where it's gone.
So everybody's free to join in. I'm just picking up comments from the chat, but please go ahead and just chime in. But Carl, can you unmute and share your comments about the future?
Well, John, this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. What about iNaturalists? Are these field guides obsolete now in an iNat world?
No, well, nothing ever goes completely obsolete. Okay. I think that basically people making identifications on iNaturalist have fundamentally gotten that information from field guides. Now, will we transition to a place where iNaturalist replaces field guides? No, because you don't have enough information. There's no life history stuff. There's not massive distributions. They show you the distribution as they have it. But it's not like described in any way. They don't have habitat data. They don't really have any of the in-depth stuff that a field guide can have. Most do. So I don't see them replacement value, but I see them as an addition. I think I wanted to add that to our community. They are an addition to our community. When we did the description, we used iNaturalist heavily. And I think Caitlin spent about 4 days going in and changing all the identifications to Celestina asheri that had been either misidentified or nobody knew. So this isn't a race, and I mean there was a time when I thought the photographer is going to take over and collecting is dead. I mean there's nobody collecting. The most prolific producer of entomological supplies was BioEquip. It went out of business. For lack of the ability to make a profit selling its wares. Collectors are old and they're going to die, and it's not a practice that people engage in. Caitlin's the exception, and there's exceptions here and there and everywhere, but it's that's just the way it is in a world that constantly is growing larger in population. You just can't have very many of them actually collecting, right? So there's going to be a shift in emphasis, but the field guide aspect of it, well, I don't think it'll change, but it won't become obsolete. Oh, by the way, do I talk too fast?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. So you have a really strong connection to some of the early field guides, not so much to the later ones. Do you use field guides as a professional, and if so, how? I mean, you talked about Caitlin, using iNaturalist, and that's really interesting as a scientist, using that tool. I was just curious if you have other examples.
Well, my progression was pretty straightforward, and it really was founded on the best butterfly book that a 12-year-old kid, or 12-year-old kid could have gotten, and that was Ehrlich's butterfly book, our How to Know the Butterflies. That had it all. It emphasized structure, it emphasized life history, emphasized being able to identify a butterfly by features, actual morphological features on the wing. It was really, really, really good for me at that time. And I went from that to Holland, which was really a step backwards. All right. Lots and lots of pictures, but I had to reinterpret all of that because it was 1930s. Ehrlich was 1961. Now, when I got to Klotz, there was a happy medium. Klotz was information rich, and it was a field guide. So I definitely glommed onto that. And those really fed my hunger. But by the time the first field guide, by the time Pyle had published his 1981 tome, I was already, I don't want to say polished, but, I'm pretty much on the trajectory. I helped him in many ways, with that tome. And, like it was something I saw as it was growing, as I said. But do I use it? Would I use it? No, I already knew all those butterflies, and that is kind of that's kind of jaundiced in a way to say that, but, it's also honest, right? So, I don't have an appreciation for most of the field guides that came after because they weren't really in my trajectory.
I have a question about the old ones, the old books.
Oh, yeah.
In perusing those old books, it sounds like you looked at them pretty good compared to the newer ones. Did any butterflies stand out in your mind that are extinct or almost extinct from them?
Well, we know of a couple that are extinct. But on a more local level, on the West Coast, there's a subspecies of Parnassius Clodius parnassian, that is extinct from Santa Cruz County, and that was figured in some earlier works. But no, most of it, like Cercionis stenley, which is the Great Basin wood nymph, it had a subspecies in San Francisco that was unique. Other butterflies, they pass from the North Peninsula south, and they're in the coastal range through San Francisco. But San Francisco was kind of a unique area. And this one butterfly, like the Xerxes blue, got wiped out. So yes, we do and have monitored butterflies that have gone extinct. What we have found, though, is that, they didn't know what we have learned. We know a lot more than they did. Things were much more widespread than they knew, and that's also important. I mean, we can't always gauge whether that's a matter of time, climate change, or what have you. Obviously, in some cases, it's a matter on the East Coast. It's a matter of how humans have impacted the environment. Current distributions of butterflies in the eastern U.S. and even butterflies in Scudder's time. I mean, for example, the cabbage white had just arrived in the New World as Scudder was writing his books. It had not spread as far as it has now. The alfalfa butterfly, the orange sulfur, it barely reached New England. It's common there now. So yeah, we do have that kind of information available, but it's more often, like that is range expansion or contraction, not so many extinctions, although it be specific colonies that were well known that got extinct. I mean, there were things that lived on Manhattan Island, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad place to set up shop.
Thank you.
Come on now. Oh. Oh, well, in that case, I'll just keep on talking because I can do that forever. No, please, no. All right. No questions. Anybody want to know about Asher's Blue?
I saw one yesterday in here in Missoula.
Oh, yeah.
I took its picture. It'll, as soon as I get it entered in, I'll flag it to make sure that Caitlin can confirm the ID in iNaturalist.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we got a lot of praise for, and I'm glad that we did, because people recognize it, and I'm glad we did it because it's so important. We included a lot of natural history. We have this tradition in the Northwest with James and Nunnally Field Guide, or the James and Nunnally Life History book, and that's, I guess that's a field guide size book, but I guess you could carry it into the field too, for that matter. And I didn't mean to ignore it. what's amazing to me is a lot of people have contacted me from back east and saying, man, you guys got something going on out there, and I've been telling them, like, yeah, we do. We have a lot of people, with a lot of eyes, and they go a lot of places, and they put themselves to good use. And we're, we can be more cohesive. I need a secretary. No takers. I mean, a lot of data. I'm processing data all the time. I'm one man against a mountain, and the mountain's growing. All right. And so, like, there's a lot of work that I have to do to keep up with all the projects, the Western USA catalog, our Atlas, the Washington Atlas. I have to update the catalog. A couple of papers were just published last week that, make mandatory changes. That'll be the second update of the catalog this year. I hate it when that happens. And all those are like, they're not major in and of themselves, but collectively, it's hard. So, the Caitlin, has got a steady job, and, she did this paper. I said, we got another paper to do. She said, I hope you're writing it. I said, well, yeah, that's like, we would like to get more people, to throw in. And we had, John has been real good with us on the east side, getting people to, to lasso them into getting us data. And we have, John's a good guy, man. Hey, John, you hear that? I said, you're a good guy. All right.
So Tyler, can you unmute and comment on your observations?
Yeah, can you hear me there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I work at the Summerland Research and Development Center in Summerland, British Columbia, Canada. We were out on the weekend, just this past weekend, looking for some Celestrina after I saw your publication. Only have seen Echo so far. We're hoping to see Asheri soon, but I went back to my collection from a couple of years ago, and I do have a couple Asheri in there. So very exciting. We're hoping to see them soon here. Just thought I'd throw that in.
Oh, that's great. Great news. Now, one of the things we discovered was in the Butterflies of BC, it was written by, Crispin Guppy, who you probably know of, and John Shepard. And they had a picture of an Asheri from Osoyoos, and, that's one of the things about Asheri that, is sort of surprising for an azure. It actually occurs out in riparian steppe habitat. So you're kind of situated where you can see them. You'll be able to go out there, and Summerland's got a lot of riparian areas below it, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Well, Caitlin just told me that she saw 40 of them over today at the time.
Holy smokes!
Yeah, well, she sent me a picture. This spring, is kind of like, I don't know the word. Sucked, I think is the word. It's cold. It was really, really, really cold, and but it's also really wet. So the type locality for Asheri is lush. So they're doing pretty good. They're doing pretty good.
That we see up on the Thompson Creek.
Huh?
Oh, excuse me. I didn't know I was unmuted. Okay, this is Mark, and I was impressed in the old books you were showing of the beautiful drawings of the caterpillars, and the caterpillars have always amazed me how people take the time to follow those through to see what kind of plant they live on. What is the general way that it's done?
You mean the painting?
No, to follow to decide which caterpillar becomes the adult.
Well, I can only tell you my experience. Okay. And I grew up in Seattle. So like almost every caterpillar I found as a young lad was a moth. No offense, but the deal was that once you find a caterpillar, it's on the food plant when you find it usually. If it's not, it's crawling away and it's going to, pupate. So like half of your work is already done. But if it's on a plant, then what you do is you provide it, food plant, a good quality food plant. And like you don't stick it in a jar. You put it in the container, use some food plant, that you have stuck in a glass of water so that it stays fresher. Keep it contained, but it's not that hard. And what happens most of the time that, with people that, are raising larvae, they figure it out, and they figure out their own things. I've had, Dave Nunley, when he first started doing his stuff, he was showing me stuff he discovered. He said, well, this is what I do. And I said, holy crap, that works better, So you can figure it out. The most important thing is persistence, and patience. And the second most important thing is that when your prize caterpillar, is getting near the time when you think it's going to pupate and turn into a chrysalis, instead turns into a bunch of maggots, okay? Because this is Mother Nature's way of keeping things in control. They're called parasitoids. And they're not real pleasant for someone who spent so much time feeding that caterpillar, right? But it's science. And, like we tell people that you should keep the flies that emerge, and we correlate them with, the caterpillars, and that's, that's knowledge. But I don't know, where do you live, first of all? Tyler? No, not Tyler. Who's
this is Mark.
Mark, sorry.
Yeah. I'm the one that went to UW with you guys and didn't know you at the time, though.
Oh, yeah.
I live over right by state line, east of Idaho,
Right.
Spokane.
Now, see, you're going to find lots of butterfly larvae over there. The number one thing you have to do is figure out what food plants, are likely, like you can never go wrong with ceanothus. Okay. So if you find ceanothus, it's like 7 or 8 species that, actually use that plant. So if you just, suss it out, you're liable to find one of them at least.
Well, I saw my first snowberry checker spot, and I've been looking on snowberry, and I mean, boy, there's a lot of snowberry. I don't know how you find that one larva out there.
Well, the time to find them is in the spring after the adults emerge, because they lay their eggs communally, and when they come out, they make a communal web, and they're conspicuous. So that's the time. Of course, there is a downside to all that. You have to get them through the winter, right?
Okay.
But generally speaking, what that does is it alerts you to where they are. So in the spring, when you go back, after the winter, where to look, because those larvae were in that region. You go into that same area, you're liable to find larvae there.
Oh yeah.
They're single after diapause. They're singletons, but
Mark, that checker spot should be up on slopes of Micah Peak. Not far from
absolutely,
you.
yeah.
Oh, higher elevation.
Well, they're
Moderate
all the way.
elevations, not top.
Okay.
We have them in our backyard too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have snowberry in our backyard that we transplanted from the mountain to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question for you, John.
Oh.
If I could just butt in quickly, what would a high elevation Celestrina asheri lookalike be? Something from near the top of Mount Spokane.
Well, that's hard to say. Okay. It's got ventral markings that are dark.
Yes.
Well, there's no echo does. So it's an asheri. Okay. But
Okay.
yeah, that's one of the things that we weren't able to relate the genomic data because we had a clash with the genomicist. And, but I have all that data. There's no echo that ever, has, the dark marking. So anything that he has with even a blotch is asheri. So now we have discovered also that they're not restricted to Cornus sericea, red osier. They also use ocean spray.
That's what we got on Mount Spokane.
There you go. That sounds about right.
Hey, Gary, do you mind unmuting and asking your question? Because I think it's a good one.
Oh, yeah, John, I was wondering, what about field guides to American territories like St. John's, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Caribbean?
I would say Hawaii is a piece of cake. Actually, there are some things that you could go, download from online, and there's less than 30 butterfly species. So, that's not, a problem. But Puerto Rico, that's a challenge. And there was a time when Andy and I were putting together the catalog. We thought, well, we're including Hawaii. Should we include, American territories? American Samoa kind of made that a little more difficult, but Puerto Rico just said, nah, that was like, nah, we ain't doing that. That's a very species rich territory. And that's probably a good idea that someone would take it upon themselves to do a field guide for Puerto Rico. Yeah, that would be, there is a field guide for Cuba, and it is available only in Cuba. So that is, a problem for us.
In
What do
Spanish
you
or
know
English?
about Puerto Rican butterfly?
Huh?
Do you know about Puerto Rican butterfly?
Well, I do because, I'm steeped in, all of the putting together of the, Butterflies of America website. I mean, I can't tell you, that I could sit down and write a list of them right now, but I could give you a lot of them right off the bat. I mean, they're Caribbean. So there is a guild of Caribbean butterflies that are shared between almost all the islands, right? So before I forget, did you like that goddess, the obsidian butterfly? That was like, that was almost frightening. When I was going through looking for things, and I saw this image, and it was tiny on the screen, and then I opened it and it was like, boom. It was like, holy crap. She got claws on every blimb, and, obsidian butterfly is the papaloro. I said it, I think.
So Carl has an image of a Celestrina in the chat that's really beautiful. And then Tyler, why don't you unmute and ask your question, because it's free discussion now.
Great, thanks. John, you said you had genomic data that didn't make it into the paper. Was that CO1 or CO1 mitochondrial DNA?
No, this is all from the Z sex chromosome. And this was all nuclear, right? And it turns out this is the interesting thing about a lot of butterflies that are hard to identify, both in terms of visual appearance and in terms of genomics. Our genomics colleague, he says, "Oh, I cannot discern species." His criteria are more, they use the FST and the G-min values. And the standard values, like for humans and everything, they're kind of in the 1 to 2, range. Well, for Celestrina, they're all one species according to, those values. Well, we know they aren't because there's a lot of places where there's sympatries, not just here, but elsewhere. And, it's like there's something wrong. So he went in and he used a technique, and he used it improperly. He used a, structure. You know what structure is?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, population.
Yep.
And so he created artificial prior restraints, and he just said, okay, so I'm going to do this to see what I get, and boom, he was able to distinguish all of the species that people had contributed by their identifications from East Coast, West Coast, and whatnot, and it was giving definition. Now, by the normal genomic criteria, that's not a very good measure. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't stand rigor. And we didn't use it because he did really preferred that we didn't. But even if he comes out with it, a structure analysis of strictly Z chromosome is kind of iffy in terms of like but since it does absolutely parallel, all the, like for instance, for example, the two taxa that concern us in the Northwest was Celestrina echo and Asheri. And there's a significant portion of the ranges that overlap. Well, in the Z chromosome structure files, they maintain absolute integrity over this whole sympatric area. There's a little hint of maybe some, integration, but it's really minuscule, right? And that, for echo, that is integritous all the way to San Diego, from Western BC all the way to San Diego, right? And it gets all the way over into southeastern BC and western Montana, and it basically has a uniform, well, I don't want to say nuclear. I can't tell you how many actual base pairs are involved, right? But in the structure file, it's all a uniform comparison. Asheri clashes with it everywhere, completely distinct from everything else. What that means in terms of the rigor, I don't have to figure out. I told you I was a truck driver.
That's great. Thanks so much, John.
You bet.
So since the Echo and the Asherai are in the same areas, do you expect any mixing of those two at some point?
Well, we did, initially. In fact, we thought that's exactly
I
what was
know.
happening.
Yeah, I know.
But actually, in terms of the samples, nah. I mean, the samples come back as one or the other. We don't get
Yeah.
anything that's, a mush anywhere. And this is true for Montana as well. Steve Kohler's contributed. And, again, it's by a criterion that is questionable. But, like if only one thing works, then, I guess maybe we have to find a way to use it or explain it and explain why it works. Or maybe the differences between these taxes. Well, I have a theory. Okay, you want to hear it? Okay. You don't want to hear it. I'm going to tell you anyway. There's only one thing that really defines a species, right? And everyone says, well, reproductive compatibility. Phooey. It's will she or won't she mate? If a female refuses to mate, then that is end that argument. If she accepts a mate, then you can go from there, right? If she accepts a mate that's not conspecific, then she's going to have a hard time with her offspring, and they're going to have a hard time going through the same gamut that that they would have to endure even if she mated with the proper mate. The point is that it's important that she not. And so how does that happen? Well, I know because males are pretty. We dance around and we do all the nice stuff. It smells so good. It's the smell and it's the color blue. And Gary's going to show us how that works because these azures are blue and it's a refracted color. And that's kind of like where Gary's at. Yeah.
John,
Yeah.
it isn't just color. We're finding its polarization as well as color.
Well,
They
okay.
can see polarization, and we're thinking that the females viewing the polarization properties of the male is a measure of fitness.
Well, it would have to be, but the males have to have a genetic component to that. If it's driven just by, how good a meal they had, as the last instar larva, then, that's kind of like iffy. I am more inclined to think that there's something that they do to signal to a female that they are acceptable as like a female can make a choice between several different males of the same species, right? And that would be a fitness issue. But they have to make the choice of the right species. And that's a genetic control issue. There has to be some genetic control over that. It might be like two nucleotides, or two base pairs.
Hey, John, we're working on that too. We're figuring out what their visual capabilities are when they're one-on-one at a body length, where they can see these tiny marks and the properties of it. And it goes both ways. The males and females are different parts of the eyes are different. And by the way, Asherai and Echo, they have different visual systems.
Oh, well, I'm not surprised. Now, are you looking at what they smell like?
Nope.
Well, there are androconiums.
I know. There's a lot going on here. I'm looking at something that hasn't been appreciated before and trying to get, I'm old, so.
Now,
I'm
y'all
limited
remember
in
I
what
was talking about our community here, this is an example. This is a high-end scientist guy that comes and hangs out with us.
Yeah, actually, tomorrow, we're sending off a paper we've been working on for 10 years. I thought I'd die before it gets out. And once it's out, Nomi said, I can't talk about this to anybody for 10 years. I mean, it's been crazy, but soon I can. And I just love to give a talk about that.
Yes, we'll sign you up.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you, Gary, about polarization. I think about polarization as just being the angle of light rotation. Is that what varies, or patches of polarized material, or what is it that you're seeing as being a choice that the female makes? You're muted.
Oh, yeah, the paper that I'm talking about being published, it's what the males are doing. its attractiveness. It's when the males approach from a distance a bunch of, well, this is with the Australian Gelmina sivagoris, the imperial hair streak. That's Nomi Pierce's main animal from Australia. So we built this around kind of multidisciplinary approach to how polarization is used at long range for the males to figure out, yeah, well, no, not just initially at far range, but when they get close to a choice between two different flapping models, what do they choose and what are the cues they use to choose? That's what it's all about.
So yeah, I get that there are cues, but I guess I'm just struggling to understand how polarization is used as a variable cue. I mean, it's just the rotation of light, right?
Do you know about the difference of how photoreceptors are structured in insects compared to like us? You know, microvilli versus not?
Not really. Maybe, maybe this is too technical for me, but it's.
Well, no, it's pretty simple. Just very quickly is the photoreceptor ultrastructure has like a bunch of straws packed together, the microvilli that are parallel, and the visual pigments are hung in those. And as a result, they're sensitive to polarization because of the structure of the photoreceptor.
Okay.
More to come when I give a talk.
Okay, I can't wait. So,
Gary, you noticed in looking at the eyes of Escheri and Echo that they'd have different visual systems, and so that was your cue to figure out how they were using those.
you're muted. You're muted, Gary. Gary, unmute. Gary, can you unmute? We can't hear you.
I was using the space bar, but I guess it didn't work. Is it working now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. So I shine light into the eye. I've given talks to WABA before. Have you seen, the eye shine of butterflies? They have eye shine, and so I use that as a means of figuring out what they can see. And I use polarization in my work to see how eye shine varies with polarization. That's what I'll talk about as far as the array design.
And Echo and Asherai are different?
Yep.
Interesting. Is that in your paper too?
Oops, sorry. Yeah, Asherai is prettier than Echo. Its eyes.
So Patricia, can you unmute and ask your question?
John,
Yeah.
Patricia here.
Are you gonna yell at me?
Oh no, I'm just a bit curious if what's happening.
Well, I texted back to you that, I'm getting to, forgive me. I am like called upon to do a lot, and, like I even have kids, and my sister broke her hand. I mean, like there's things that, affect me that I had, no control over. And the things that I have control over, I overdo, like I had 300 slides tonight that I had to pare down, so like I'm sorry that I don't, get back. I have all of everything you've ever sent me,
No, the question, do you want stuff that I didn't see your message, but you want records still?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking.
Yeah, never, like, by the way, and I've said this before, if you are a Polygonia satirus, a satyr angle wing, you want to live on Orcas Island. That seems to be the vacation ground for that butterfly species. I have more records of that species from that place than anywhere else in Washington.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Lots of nettles.
Well, that's a key element, you know. Well, you
Yeah.
get red admirals once in a while too.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just checking.
Okay, I'm glad.
Any other comments, questions, further discussion?
Hey, I want you guys to know this was like a favorite thing for me to do. It was hard because it was, I had to fit a lot into it. It was really important that y'all saw how this was a progress, through time and space and different things, like the Civil War, World War II, and how it actually, all these events conspired to arrive at a moment. And, like really, and I'm not lying, and because, I don't think, Bob couldn't be here, and it's probably a good thing. He wouldn't like that traveling gnome thing, but it's recorded. He'll probably see it anyway. I'm doomed. But, like his tone in the Auto on Field Guide, that was what set this thing aright. I mean, honest to goodness, that's not just my viewpoint, I mean, I'm not just telling you what I think because I got a chance to see it hatched. So it's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to do this.
It was really great, John. Thank you.
John, I have a request. Yeah, it was really great, and I appreciate all the time you spent putting it together, and the images of the butterflies from long ago, the geometric ones. Could you somehow make that available to us? Because
you talking about the like the Aztecan figures and
just a lot of your images. Yes, some of those. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, not a problem. For the Gnome or something like that.
That would be fun too.
I would like to find more. When I started looking into Mesoamerican images of butterflies, I found that, probably 30% of them were like post 50s, right? And a lot of them were like the obsidian butterfly, members of religious sects that were, Nahuatl speaking people. And this is it's kind of like revived, but the obsidian butterfly, that's an interesting concept. There are other images, but I'll put them all together for you for sure. But she was something else. I mean, I have nightmares about her.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Actually has her own Wikipedia page. I just Googled it, obsidian butterfly, and she popped right up on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I knew I had discovered her.
Okay, anything else? Any other comments?
I think John disappeared. No, there he is.
No, he's here.
Yeah, no.
You wish.
Okay, well, John, thank you so much. When you suggested this, I thought, wow, what's he going to talk about? This has been really, really interesting, and I have enjoyed it so much. As Regina says, whatever John's going to talk about, it's going to be interesting, and it's true. It was really, really fabulous. So thank you so much. I know you put a lot of time into it, and we really, really appreciate it.
Well, I think you're a little too generous.
I don't.
I thank you guys, man. I mean, you guys deserve a hand,
Okay, well, thanks everybody. This is our last meeting for, we're going to be doing field work for the summer. So we'll pick up again in the autumn, and we'll have a bunch of great talks then as well. This Zoom thing seems to be working. So I'm really glad that we can bring in people, speakers from all over the country, and also, interested parties from all over the state and beyond. So, okay, everybody, have a great field season, and we'll see you next fall. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Adios. Thanks.
Bye.